Next, we will have Mr. Andrews Johnson from Sweden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm sitting with the back towards the watch, so you may have to help me. Good morning to everybody. I welcome this opportunity to speak on the subject of effective political participation of minorities, and I thank the independent expert on minorities for her initiative in organizing the forum on this particular subject. As the Secretary General of the International Organization of Parliaments, you will not be surprised that my remarks will focus on the participation of minorities in Parliament. I will address two aspects: gaining access to Parliament and influencing the work once you are in Parliament. My remarks are based on interviews that we have carried out with many members of Parliament from both minority and majority communities in the context of a project that the ITU is carrying out with UNDP to promote inclusive parliaments. And while every parliament has a unique history, tradition, and modus operandi, we do believe that the points that follow are hold true for most, if not all, political systems. The main obstacle to entering Parliament has to do with political parties and how they operate. In most countries, political parties are indispensable to the working of democracy. They aggregate political interests and provide voters with policy choice equals to Parliament, with the power to decide who becomes a candidate for election and whether they will have a reasonable prospect of winning a seat. Yet the leadership of mainstream political parties tends to be dominated by men from the majority community, who often choose candidates perceived to be safe. In other words, who look like themselves and are perceived to share their values. This process excludes those who have a minority background. When mainstream political parties put forward minority candidates, it is often in the hope that these candidates will open up new voter constituencies and attract more voters to the party. However, this incentive is often mitigated by a perception of political apathy in those communities resulting from poverty, language, and education, as well as a reluctance to participate in political processes that many minorities believe as being controlled majority communities. The result is a vicious circle of systemic exclusion of minority candidates. Although grassroots movements often campaign forcefully for minority rights and inclusion, these movements have not constituted themselves as political parties, and consequently they are not able to present candidates for election. Of course, money is a major determinant in running a successful election campaign. The larger mainstream political parties typically have access to public and private sources of funding that new or small parties simply do not. Parties that specifically represent minority interests often fall into this second category. Many members of Parliament whom we have spoken to argue forcefully that special measures such as reserved seats or a requirement for political parties to include minorities as electoral candidates are the only ways to address systematically the exclusion of minorities. Yet others reject equally forcefully all forms of affirmative action in favor of minorities. They argue that political parties must look inside themselves and realize that diversity is the way of the future in multicultural societies. The obstacles faced by minorities in entering Parliament are largely the same that women face. Male-dominated political parties, inequality in society, as well as lack of access to funding, have for generations excluded women from gaining access to Parliament. It is therefore not uninteresting to note that where women are now able to overcome these obstacles and enter Parliament in significant numbers, it is through a combination of measures which invariably include a massive doses of awareness-raising campaigns and some form of quota or affirmative action. It is not by waiting for the political parties to take action.
I want to move to the next announcement, which is that an integral part of this forum is the side event that will take place during lunchtime. It will be focused on the special obstacles faced by women in gaining their right to full, effective political participation. It will take place in room 24. So I urge you all to come.
And thankful to the minority rights group because they have been one of our partners in some of the programs. During the course of my 20 years of community work, I encountered many problems that disadvantaged and underserved women and girls face every day. I was touched by poverty, lack of education, and economical empowerment of my past family members and the entire community. So I offered myself for an elective leadership position to represent my community in Kenya Parliament in 1997. As a result, I became the first Somali woman to contest for a parliamentary seat in Kenya. This became a big news to our community and the country, since no woman from our community ever aspired to this position. And what's enough, Muslim communities were not known for female leadership representation. I also belong to a religious minority who are not known to have ambitions in the country. It was at this time, this trying moment of my life. The campaign period was tough, and the strength of my faith, family, place in society, and personal conviction was tested. Negative cultural and religious practices were used against me during the campaigns. Main candidates reminded the community about tradition, religious roles of the women, and stated that God will cast a community led by a woman. The community was informed this cast may kill their children and animals, because remember, I'm from pastoralist community, and pastoralist is the animals is the backbone of the community. So the community were fearing because of that. It was such a that it gave a lot of problems during that time. During the campaign, I still remember male candidates equating women's intelligence to that of a baby born the following day. But to the surprise, the people overwhelmingly elected my development was unmatched with the people, and the people got hope and with the messages that I was giving. The men candidates were very decisive, and the campaign was based on attacking me as a woman, whereas my campaigns were based on issues, ideas, and platform of change. They created a lot of emotion among my sex and exploited negative cultural and religious practices, unfortunately with the hope of winning the hearts and minds of the Muslim voters. I won these elections, but the men did not stop at that. My election was not taken lightly by male candidates. With the help of senior government officials from the area, they petitioned the government to disqualify my election on public interest. As a result, the president himself came to the TV and disqualified my election. As a result, the victory was stolen from me, and the people's wish to elect a person of their choice was prevented. It was a major blow to the community and to me, but no amount of crying would change the situation, since the country was under dictatorship and the word of the president and the party leadership was the final. The government and the party establishment listened and considered the view of pro-religion and pro-culture opponents of to oppose my elections instead of leaving democracy to prevail. However, after the election was stolen from me, as soon as I could recollect myself, I went back to the grassroots, embarked on community education and development. I joined civil society and conducted civic education to educate the community on leadership and constitutional reforms. One of the lessons I learned during the election was women were not represented in political party leadership. And it was easy to rig them out of elections because they are the men who make the decision at the party level.